Well, hey everybody, good morning. The other day I did a little sound sample on this guitar, and today I'm going to do a bit of a deeper dive on it because it's an interesting guitar. And there are three different stories around this guitar. First is how I came about owning it. Secondly is the story of the guitar itself and why it was produced, or presumably why it was produced. And third, what happened after I got it and went to use it for the first time, which was very recently. So anyways, with that being the case, it is a Gibson SG 50's Tribute. And if you can see the back, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this in the camera, it says Prototype on the back. It's stamped in there, and it was put there by Gibson. So again, I don't know how it's going to show up in the camera, if at all. But that's what makes it kind of unique, because generally speaking, a prototype guitar is obviously something that is being made for the first time, or as a developmental model, to work out the kinks or make final determinations about what's going to go into production. So a real prototype is generally a relatively rare guitar because they don't make a lot of them, and they're very collectible. So I had watched an episode of Trogley's Guitar Show. It's been a long time ago. It was probably about the time the episode was produced, about this model guitar, and talking about how this was not a real prototype. So the story of this guitar is that it's kind of a fanciful creation by Gibson. So the idea was, if there was a prototype of this model guitar on the bench sometime in the late 50s, this might have been what it was. And this is similar to the rollout of the newer, Gibson had discontinued the production of the Les Paul guitars, and there are a whole bunch of stories about why that might be the case. Could have been that they were dropping Les Paul as an artist, or it could have been that there was a contractual end to Les Paul's agreement, or it could have been that Les Paul said that he was getting a divorce from his wife Mary Ford and didn't want the income. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of different stories about why Gibson dropped the Les Paul, but they created this guitar, which from everything I've read may have been an offshoot of other guitars that they created, that this kind of became the final body style version. And it was originally called a Les Paul, and again, multiple stories about the fact that Les Paul didn't like it. They had brought him back on board for the naming of the guitar, and so it didn't last very long as in Les Paul, and became the SG shortly thereafter. But that was sometime in the early 60s, like 60, 61, 62, that all that transition was taking place. And then the Les Paul was reintroduced as we know it today, as a single cut contoured body guitar, and this became the SG. So this guitar is not called an SG or a Les Paul, it's just called a 50's Tribute Prototype. And I think when they first rolled out, people got their hands on them and thought they really had a prototype. And the reality is, I don't know how many they made. Must not have been a lot of them, because right now to find this cherry satin finish is very difficult. They made them in ebony, a burst that's like a tobacco burst, and then this cherry finish. I haven't been able to find another one since I bought this one for sale. There are some ebony ones, and there are some of the burst finishes available. So I know this one's a 2013 based on the serial number and the historical information that I read. So I don't think they produced a lot of them, and if they did, it was only for a short period of time. So again, very interesting guitar. And like I said, if you want to get more information about this model. Trugley did a real good overview of the difference between this and a real prototype. But it was about the same time. I either bought this right before I saw that video or right after I saw the video, and I got a really good deal on it. So the first story is about the guitar itself, which I just told. The second story is how I arrived at getting this guitar. And this SG was the first of these two guitars that I bought after having owned quite a few SGs before and not having had one for a while. I wanted to start playing one again, so I ended up getting this guitar. I got it home and discovered that it had a headstock break, or I think I might have even discovered that when I picked it up at Guitar Center. I had it shipped in, it was used. I got it, I think I discovered it had a headstock break while I was at the store, but decided to take it home and keep it, and then decided after a day that I didn't want it. Took it back, ordered this one. The order on this one got canceled. So I went back to the store and picked this one up, and 20 minutes after I got home from picking this one up again, after I rebought it, after I'd returned it and gotten a refund, I got a notification that this one had come in. So I went back and I got this one too. So that's why I ended up with two of them. And this one with the broken headstock or repaired headstock just became a daily player for me. It was very similar to the last SG that I had had probably 6 or 7 years before I bought this one, that I had sold to a friend of mine. And, you know, I liked it, and I didn't have much money in it, and, you know, with a repaired headstock, I figured the value wasn't that great, and it's got some dings and scuffs, and so I figured, you know, this will be a great daily player, and it has been. It's been spectacular. With this one, I was kind of on a buying spree at that time. It was, you know, before we fully came out of the recession. Guitar Center was having some financial problems. Guitars were dirt cheap then. Both these guitars cost less than $1,000 combined. If you could even find this one now, I'm guessing it'd be around $1,400. And I don't know about the other one, because that one will never be for sale, because I don't have anything into it. It's you know, beat up and suits me perfectly, and there's no reason to get rid of it. This one, on the other hand, is almost perfectly pristine. So when I got it, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I didn't have a set of P90 pickups. The only other guitar that I've ever owned with P90s was a Gibson Les Paul Special with P90s. And I had it I bought it new when Mars Music was in business at their going out of business sale. So it was late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know when they went out of business, but it was after I moved to Florida in 99. And I went in the store and they were just clearing everything out. And I picked it up. I got a real good deal on it, brand new. Brought it home, but it was a couple weeks later I noticed that the high E string didn't line up on the neck, and there's no way to really move the bridge. And I thought, well, it's going to need a neck reset. Well, at the time, I didn't realize that as a new guitar, I could have sent it back to Gibson and had them reset the neck properly. So I just lived with it for, I don't know, it was quite a while. I had that guitar for a long time. I think I had it probably at least 10 years, played it all the time. But again, wasn't a great student of guitar and of electric guitar, and didn't really understand what I was playing or why it sounded the way it did. And so it got to a point where the pickup sounded kind of muddy to me, and it was probably my amplifier and my amp settings and a whole bunch of other things that really didn't have a lot to do with the guitar. But my finger would also slip off the high E because of the misalignment of the neck. And so I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to get rid of the thing. Well, when I started building electric guitars in 2017, 2018, and started looking into pickups and learning more about them, I realized, man, I should have kept that thing, because first of all, I could have had Gibson fix it since I was the original owner and I bought it new. And secondly, I really wanted to explore P90 pickups. So when I bought this guitar, that was my goal, was to understand these pickups better and determine whether or not I wanted a guitar with P90s. I have recently purchased another little inexpensive Epiphone with P90s in it, because I want to play with the low end of the spectrum and see what the sound differences are between this and that one. So I really never played this guitar because I hadn't gotten around to that point yet. I've been kind of going through guitars, getting rid of stuff that I didn't want or didn't need, paring it down to just, the essential guitars that I'll regularly play. So I came around to this one, and I thought, I've made the mistake of not doing videos on a bunch of guitars that I had before I let them go, and I don't want to have that happen with this one. So I want to play it for a little while, do a video, and then I'll let it go. So I took it out of the case, put new strings on it, got ready to play it, sat down. This is about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. I'm not real good with time. But the neck pickup was cutting in and out. And I thought, maybe that's why it was so cheap, or maybe that's why I came to Guitar Center in the first place. And so the first thing I did was I wanted to do, I plugged in a cord to the output jack. I hooked it up to my voltmeter, and I tested the readings on both pickups, and the neck pickup by then wasn't working at all, and it was completely dead. So, okay, next step, let me open up the back and see if there's any soldering and wiring problems. And when I did that, I realized very quickly that somebody had probably modified this guitar. So I'll show you the inside of the cavity here, and you can see that it's got these two capacitors. One's blue and one has an American flag, and they both have WD. If you're familiar with guitar parts, WD is I think it's Bill and Diane, or William and Diane. They're out of New York. They produce or they sell parts. I don't know who the actual manufacturer is, but I've bought a couple of their guitar necks. I bought a couple of bridges from them. A buddy of mine knows the owners real well. He's from New York or Connecticut, one of those places. He owns a music store here in Florida, and he's good friends with them, and he's been using their products for years. So he and I had some conversations about it. I actually sent Austin at Trogley's picture and asked him if he thought this was stock, and I realized I don't think there's any possible way that Gibson was using WD parts in one of their guitars. So my inclination was that it had been modified. Well, the neck pickup leads come into this pot here. So I was able to isolate the leads and test just the pickup through the lead to determine if there was a problem between the pickup and the lead. And then my next thing, if that was a problem, was to take the pickup out. Well, I was able to get a good reading on the bridge pickup off of the leads that came down here, and got no reading from the neck pickup. So I took the guitar apart, I took the neck pickup out. Had never seen those P90s, so I didn't know if I could get to the actual leads coming off of the windings, or if I was going to get something that was coming out of a sealed unit. And it turns out it was a sealed unit, so the only thing I could do is test the leads right at the pickup to determine if there was a problem between the pickup and the end of the leads, and it was still dead. So I've mentioned the local guitar techs around here. There's a place called Guitar ER, which I got introduced to when I had this problem. There's a guy called Rock Rescue, and I have not mentioned him before, but I personally met him when I had a building permit service business where if you bought anything from Lowe's or Home Depot for our section of Florida called the Treasure Coast, from Sebastian down to Jupiter Island, those permits came through me. And so I met a lot of people. He was setting up his guitar Rock Rescue guitar shop, and he just happened to be in getting a permit at the same time I was, and we ended up talking for a couple hours. Real nice guy. I've never been to see his shop, never used him. But I wanted to mention him because there are two other techs in addition to this Guitar ER that helped me with this guitar. There's Bob Peterson, who's a spectacular luthier and technician, and then there's my buddy Tommy that works at Guitar Center in Port St. Lucie, who I spend a lot of time with, and he and I, talk and share notes on this stuff. But what happened was I got the pickup out, it didn't work, and I started doing some research to find out what the deal was with these pickups, because in my Gibson Les Paul, in this SG, the neck and the bridge pickups are individually designated, 490R and 498T in the Les Paul, and I'm not sure what these are, but I did take it apart and look, and they were different pickups, and I think they even say neck and bridge or rhythm and bridge or something. So this one has no designation, and everything I could find about it was that these two P90s are identical. And if you go to Gibson to look up buying them, they only list one pickup. So either you buy one or you buy two. And of course, I do a lot of business with Sweetwater, so I wanted to give them a shot. I looked at Guitar Center. Everybody came back at about the same price, $119. Sweetwater's got free shipping. I imagine Guitar Center would have shipped it free for $119 for one pickup. So I thought, okay, worst case scenario, I'm 119 in. So let me call this guy who I have heard about through friends and seen ads on Craigslist and on, I think it's just on Craigslist I've seen his ads, but it's called Guitar ER. And he's right on the other side of the wall from a company called Tone Shapers, which I was real curious about. Actually went in and met George Ellison, the owner of, I don't know if he's the owner of Tone Shapers, but he's the guy who's I've followed for years. If you go on to Tone Shapers' YouTube channel, you'll see that they do a lot of upgrade kits. And I've always wanted to use their stuff, and they're literally 10 minutes from my house up the road in Vero Beach. And I just happened to walk in there thinking that was the address for Guitar ER, and it turned out to be Tone Shapers. And what a beautiful operation. I mean, they have a ton of stuff in there. It's like a big warehouse, and they were in there filling orders, and I met all the guys, and I was really impressed. I will definitely consider using them for my next set of upgrade parts, and would highly recommend them based on what I saw. I mean, the place was spotlessly clean. They had everything really well organized. Obviously a spectacular operation. So anyways, I had called this guy or sent this guy at Guitar ER, his name's Paul, message and told him what was up and asked him if he could rewind a pickup for me or diagnose it and, repair it or whatever. And he said that he doesn't do the actual pickup windings and that he sends them off to a company in New York. And by the time I did that, I might be better off just buying another pickup. So, but he sent me a note and he said, have you tried to reflow the solder on the pickup? And I thought, well, I looked at it. I know what a cold solder joint looks like. I know what a bad solder joint looks like. But I'm looking at it thinking there's no way this solder joint's bad. But I thought, what do I have to lose? $119 if I'm right that it's not going to work, and it didn't cost me anything to try it. So I just reheated the solder where it comes out, where the braided cable comes out. So you have the braided, which is the shielding in the ground, and then the leads themselves are inside the shielded portion. So you get your lead that goes to a tab on the potentiometer, and then you have the shielding that goes to ground. So the only thing you can see when you open these things up, and unfortunately I didn't open them up for this video because I'm not one to take guitars that are in really good shape apart if I don't have to. I don't mind tearing into an old beater of mine because if I scratch it, it's no big deal. But this guitar is pristine. I didn't want to reopen it up just to do this portion of the video. But the bottom line is there's a little clip that comes off of the back of the P90 pickup, and then the braided portion of the cable goes through that clip and it's soldered, and that's where the ground comes from. And then that clip is screwed into the back of the pickup, and I thought, I'm going to drop a little dab of solder on where that clip mounts to the base of the pickup, since I know it's a continuous flow of current through all of those things because they're all metal and they all connect. And then reflow the solder joint on the clip itself. I did that, put the guitar back together. It works perfect. So first of all, I was very thankful to the guy at Guitar ER, and that's the third story, by the way. The first story was about why they, Gibson making the guitar. The second story is how I ended up with it, and the third story was how I got it working after I got it back. So one of the things that's interesting, of course, I've learned a lot more about how to use my amplifier and how to use my settings and a couple of pedals that I have since I had that Les Paul Special that had P90s in it. But this thing sounds, after I played it, I told my wife, I said, I don't think this guitar is going anywhere. It's just a sound that is so beautiful, and it breaks up through my tube amps so nicely. I actually have a little Laney, I think it's an LC15. It's a 15 watt tube amp, little British made thing. I picked it up from a guy up the street at a place called Dominant Music in Vero Beach. Real nice guy, Yurig is his name. And sometimes when I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm not in here in my music room where everything's set up, I'll just drag that little amp out there with no effects. It's got no reverb. It's basically like a Fender Champ amp or a Supro 65. You know, it's just a real simple tube amp. And this guitar through that amp sitting in my living room the other day sounded like the best thing I had ever heard in my life at a low volume. Even at a low volume with no effects at all, you can cause these P90s to just get that nice little breakup and by just plucking the strings a little bit harder. I mean, it is amazing. I did have a comment on my last video about this guitar, about the capacitors. A guy said that he has a 60's Tribute and he had replaced the capacitors. And I have a feeling, I have never really been able to tell the difference other than if I have opened up a guitar and it was cheap and it had the little, you know, green capacitors. I've changed them out for Sprague or Orange Drop, or I've done a couple Bumblebee capacitors, you know, just to give them an upgrade, but really could never tell the difference. I have a feeling that that may be one of the reasons that this guitar sounds so spectacular, especially considering that a capacitor changes or regulates how you use the treble in your guitar, and I never have treble turned all the way up. I usually have it somewhere in the mid-range, and then if I need to adjust it up to get a brighter sound, a lot of times I'll go to the bridge pickup, which is generally a brighter sounding pickup because of its location to the bridge. You know, you get more treble down here than you do up closer to the neck. So I rarely adjust that, and I kind of like that warm sound that you get by not having the treble turned all the way up. So where I think a capacitor, I think you would really notice the difference is if you play like I do, where the capacitor regulates that signal on your treble, which is why they got the treble bleed circuit on Telecasters, why like my American Fender that's a Stevie Ray Vaughan style with Texas Specials, and the grease bucket circuit, why it works the way it does. I think the capacitors are real big if you're not a wide open, you know, level 10 guy. I think that's when you start to see the value of them. So anyways, that's kind of the overview of this guitar. It's not going anywhere. There are a couple things I like about it, and a couple things I don't like about it. It's got these big kidney bean Grover tuners on it. And, you know, this one seems to be, I haven't weighed it, but the body is thinner than my other SG, and it's definitely lighter by probably close to a pound. That one, I believe, is around 6.5 pounds. This one's probably under 6. And with those big, heavy kidney bean tuners and kind of the bigger style Gibson headstock, this thing does have some neck dive. I have found that if I use a strap, I have, one of my favorite straps is a Fender strap. I don't know if it's around here somewhere. I don't think it is. But it's got plastic on the inside, and the reason I like it is it's real cool in this Florida hot weather. Oh, and by the way, the reason I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, and it's, you know, the second week of summer and it's about 100 degrees outside right now, is because, again, if I touch this lacquer with my skin, it will turn it white, like if you spilled alcohol on a dining room table that's finished in nitrocellulose lacquer. We have a cherry finish on the mahogany table in there, and I had some 100 proof vodka one night and just spilled a couple drops in it and turned it white instantly. By the time I get done playing this guitar with a short sleeve shirt on for about 7 or 8 minutes, it has a white spot already. So that's how reactive my skin is to nitrocellulose lacquer. So I pretty much always have a long sleeve shirt on if I'm playing one of those. My Martin, it's got nitrocellulose lacquer finish on it. I don't really care. That thing I've already worn the finish off of the corner. It's got a couple of stress fractures along the outside of the top that have been, you know, properly repaired. They got cleats inside of them, and they didn't do a real good job of getting the finish off where they did the repair, which is something I can certainly do if I ever decide to do it. I make it, I can make it almost invisible. But that guitar it's not a real expensive guitar, and I'll play it with a short sleeve shirt on or no shirt on at all, and I don't care if it gets a little milky colored or it starts to wear the lacquer off a little more. And a couple of my other guitars, they're worn to a point where it doesn't matter. My other SG, it's got a satin finish. It doesn't seem to be as susceptible to that as this one, because even though it's a satin finish, it's kind of glossy. I mean, it's a beautiful finish. Like if I were to, I have finished most of my guitars in a high gloss, and you can see the neck just from little amount of playing I've done has already shined up. But I could get this thing to be, a full gloss finish. I mean, you can see where I rested on my leg. That's starting to gloss up. You can see where I hold the top of it. That's starting to gloss up. But this finish is it's heavenly. That's the only way I can describe it. And the guitar, it sounds so good. The neck is a little bit chunkier than my other SG. If I had a contour gauge, I could show you what it was. But, when it said 50's Tribute, I've played some 50's Les Pauls and some 50's Fenders, and they're just not my style. I'm used to that. All the Martin D18s I had a nice thin neck. I've had a bunch of SGs with a thin neck. I've had both of my Strats. I think it's a 05 or 02. The one that I did the video on the other day, the brown one, that has a little beefier neck, but it's not uncomfortable. This one is also, I don't know what that neck came off of, because it doesn't have any serial numbers on it, but it's a little bit beefier too, but nothing on the order of a 50's Gibson or a 50's style Fender. So this one's really, I would have to call it a C shape. The one on the other SG is a little more of a D shape, but it's very comfortable to play. And like I said, after I got it fixed and heard it, just sitting there through my little 15-watt tube amp, with no effects, no nothing, I said, this guitar's never going anywhere. This thing sounds so good. And of course, the downside to that is I keep finding these little gems in the stuff that I have, and my collection's not getting shrunk nearly as fast as I want it to. So at some point I'll have to make some tough decisions, but for right now, man, this thing is really awesome. So anyways, that is the Gibson SG 50's Tribute story, and that's my particular story about this one. So hope you all have a great day.